Hello, I'm Odin, and this video is another Mechagodzilla build. And this time, I'm going to make the hands and finish the elbows. In my previous video, I ran into problems with making the elbow covers. They were too small and didn't flex enough to allow full movement. The improvement that I thought of was to offset the armhole in more of an egg-shaped sleeve. Now these sew together much easier, but that was only part of the solution. 3 different people all gave me another solution. The 2 of those are patrons of mine, Dylan Calvin and Stupid Monkey, and the 3rd was my live stream co-host, Felicia. They all suggested the same thing, adding an additional half circle of folds added to the outside of the elbow. And Darren actually made a paper model which helped me understand the concept. The idea is when it's finished, there'll be 4 rings on the inside, but 6 rings on the outside, which is the side that needs to travel farther to open up when the elbow bends. So on my Discord chat for Patreon, both Stupid Monkey and Darren were giving me a really good idea on how to do this double accordion piece in order to make it open up wide enough. So, Darren, what do you think? Now, before I get started on Mechagodzilla's hands, I want to take a moment to thank this video's sponsor, Tennis Clash. This is a free, fun, player versus player tennis game with cool RPG elements that you can play right on your phone. Tennis Clash has over 60 million downloads. It's got a great rating and it's free to play and available for Android and for iOS. Be sure to use the link in the description and you'll get yourself a bonus of 200 gems and 500 gold. Not only will you be supporting my channel, you're going to start your game with a really strong advantage. When you're playing live 1 versus 1 matches against real players in the world's most famous tennis arenas. And matches are based off of difficulty. I'm gonna go easy because I'm out of shape. Now when we enter, we go against a real player. Now we have some pretty similar stats, so this should be okay. Oh, you returned it. Okay, that was pretty good. Going again. There are a lot of different characters that you can unlock just by playing, and they have different attributes that you can then upgrade. You can work on your forehand, your backhand, or agility. You can also upgrade your equipment, which will augment all of those abilities. Download Tennis Clash now for free from the links in the description of this video, and you'll get 200 gems, 500 gold, and you'll be helping to support my channel. Just like when I made the arms, I sketched the hands so I could understand how the parts were shaped. Then I took the time to convert my sketch into a vector line drawing. And this time I paid more attention to all the parts being the same size. This allowed me to scale the drawing to fit my arms and my hands. Yeah, it's too small. I scaled up the drawing again and added more detail to the back of the hand. Now I just need to remake this line art into a foam object. I think I want to start on the fingers first because these are solid and I don't have to put my fingers in them. So I want to do these first and then I'll work on getting the rest of the hand done. I have a good chunk of heavy-duty kneeling pad foam and it's almost perfect for the metacarpal area of the hand. I want the metacarpals to be about 42 millimeters on each side. Cutting the foam in this direction, well, that's easy. But once I remove the texture from the foam, it's much less than 42 millimeters thick. And the pad is only about 40 millimeters thick to begin with. So I cut some 4 millimeter foam strips to add to the kneeling pad pieces. Contact cement will glue them onto each side. Now they're very close to 42 millimeters on each side and no longer have any texture. Perfect. I draw 2 lines 2 millimeters apart down the center of the 4 millimeter foam. I can tilt the table of my bandsaw to 45 degrees, and I can use those lines as guides so I can cut the angles into each block, making them into long octagons. Now, just for fun, I check the sides if they're all still the same, and they're very, very close. I measure how long each metacarpal needs to be. 3 strips was enough to get a full set for both hands with a small piece left over. I also trimmed the ends clean so everything was square. Okay, so I've got my fingers and thumbs, and I'm really happy he's only got 3 fingers per hand. That's less to make, right? So that's cool. The end of each one of these is cut into a wedge. I mark the center line on each one, keeping the gray foam as the top edge on each one of them. Now I could just cut them on my bandsaw again, but if I use my large disc sander, they can be made much more uniformly. The block of wood that you see is just a guide to keep the foam at 90 degrees to the disc. I can see the guideline that I drew on the top of the foam, and all I need to do is push the foam into the disc and erase the parts that I don't want. Perfect 45-degree angle. Looking down from the top, it's very easy to see where that line is. And if I go over, well, I can just flip the foam over and adjust the other side to match. So the next part I want to make is the round base of each finger. And it's not just a single piece of 30mm dowel, I actually need to cut it on an angle because of the way I made the fingers. I could, I suppose, drill a hole in each of these. That would probably work as well. This seemed easier to me. The first cut is easy. Just cut about halfway into the foam dowel on a 45-degree angle, which I have set with my guide. But the second cut needs to be square to the first. So I stick a thin metal eraser shield into my first cut. That way I can make sure the flat edge of the shield is along the table, and that guides me into a 90-degree cut to the blade. Then I hold the foam steady, remove the shield, and make the second cut. Repeat that 8 times. I cut up the rest of the dowel to make the fingertips. I was able to get 9 pieces that are the right size for the fingertips. But I want the fingertips to be a larger diameter than the finger bases. So I glue a strip of 2mm foam around the end of each fingertip blank. The next thing I need to do is sand them into like a rocket shape. To get the center point for each one, I trace the circle of the dowel onto paper. Now I cut out the circle and then fold it in half twice, and I can make a hole in the paper where X marks the spot. And then I can dot the center of each foam dowel easily. To sand the end into the shape that I want, I put a drywall screw into my drill and then skewer the foam onto the screw. But wait, you say, the head of the screw, it's going to be in the way when you try to put it into the drill like that. I know that, so I just use my cutoff wheel on my rotary tool to remove the head of the screw, and that section without the threads, that's easy to chuck into a drill. With each blank on my drill, I can then roll the tip on my belt sander and make a rocket nose cone shape very easily. I clean up the back edge of each fingertip with my rotary tool, adding a shallow bevel onto each one. I need one more piece for this part. I make a cone pattern that'll connect the two, and cut the parts from some 2mm What the foam. I contact cement the ends and roll each one into a little cone shape. Then contact cement each end of the cone to a fingertip and to a finger base. So I got all my fingers made, and I need to attach these to the parts of the hand, which means I got to attach that together, preferably without contact cement sticking before it gets to where it needs to go. So I think the best way to attach the two is super glue. I apply a little glue inside each finger, and I have a second or two that I can adjust the placement before it sets up. Contact cement would stick immediately without the ability for any adjustment. Next, I need to stick these finger assemblies together. This time, I will use contact cement. It takes a couple of minutes to dry, so the parts will actually stick together. So while the contact cement dries, I start cutting out the cuff that I'm going to need to hide my hand inside of Mechagodzilla's hand. What I'm using again is 2mm What the foam, so I can maximize the space inside of the hand. I contact cement the ends and then roll it up into a tube. Now, of course, I'm leapfrogging cement dry times, so when the fingers were ready, I stuck them together as well. The physical parts are lining up with my blueprint, which is always a good feeling. The back part of the hand, the heel of the hand, I also sand down into a 45-degree angle. I use my protractor to find the angle that I'm going to need to cut so I can fit the thumb to the fingers. I make a cardboard template that's the width of the thumb and it has a 15-degree angle, which I can then trace onto both the thumb and the fingers. When glued together, the thumb will stick out at about a 30-degree angle. The 2mm foam cuff easily slips inside of the sleeve, and my hand fits in the cuff. Now I need to start thinking about how I'm going to attach the cuff to the fingers. When the cement was ready, I stick the thumbs to the fingers. I've got fingers! I need to fill the gap between the fingers where the cuff will attach. So I cut wedges from scraps of kneeling pad, and I cut a 45-degree angle on one end, and then super glue them in between each finger. Now I'm jumping ahead a bit. I figured out what I needed to do before I hit record on the camera to make sure that I could make it work. So what I've done is use the hole drill to put an indent on either side of the inside of the hand, where my hand's gonna go. That way I can take a piece of scrap plastic tube and put it between the holes that I made. This will give me a place for my hand to go. Then I can glue the red piece on around the plastic tube, and I've got a sleeve for my hand to go into. The cuff needs to ramp down to the fingers, so first I cut out a couple of darts and draw a line for glue. Then I can cut a panel of 6mm foam with beveled edges, and this will fit over the gap connecting the cuff to the fingers. Of course, the actual hands in the movie have the same panel detail. One fun thing to note is that this hand, that's the rocket firing finger close-up hand, and it's slightly different from the costume hand of the suit. That glove looks like cast rubber, and there's this Frankenstein bolt at the base that the close-up hand doesn't have. Now what I think that is I think that's the rod that the actor can hold to keep the costume hand attached to the suit. Because you see how the wrist wrinkles right here, just about where a human wrist would be? All of these observations that I made is done pretty much by just looking at the movie. And so if I'm wrong about something and someone has reference links to better information, please let me know in the comments below. And thank you for attending my prop talk. Now back to the build. When I glue the panels down, I add a small wedge to the side to hide the roll of the red foam, and my hand can easily fit inside of the costume hand. There's a raised detail panel that fits right behind the transition plate. So I cut out my pattern and trace that onto some 6mm foam. I'm gonna need 4 of them, so I stack 4 pieces of foam together and tape them into a unit. That way I can cut all 4 pieces out at once on my bandsaw. I traced the outline onto the red foam so I knew exactly where to glue them on, and the detail panels are in place. Okay. I've got one final detail before I can start getting them painted, and that's to put the little rivets that go right up here. And that's what I had cut this piece of paper out for. You lay that on top. I traced the circles to mark the placement of the rivets. I have some stick-on pearls from the scrapbook department at whichever hobby store you want to go to. These are pretty much exactly right. It'd be a little weird to paint. They might peel. Well, they will peel. I know they'll peel. But probably should spray paint them first. Do I have time to do that? I don't want to wait for them to dry. It would be wise. Well, they didn't get painted, but super glue stuck them onto the foam very securely. There. Okay. Is it just me? The coloration here, the red, black, gray, white, this really reminds me of another mech or another character. I mean, aside from the 80s Flash Gordon movie, but if it would be gold and black and red instead of white, black, and red. Do you guys, does this spark a memory for anyone else? If it does, please leave a comment below so I can read it, because I honestly, this really reminds me of somebody or something, but I don't know what. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of my contact cement and I'm going to paint over the tips of all the fingers, because that'll help cut down on the fuzziness from the sanding. And then I'm going to cover these in Plasti Dip. You know, I do like this stuff when it's solid black. It's much better when it's actually painted, but I do like the props when they're solid black. I wonder if there's a good solid black prop or cosplay that I can do, you know, like disaster area ship or something. I mix up the same acrylic paint that I've used for the rest of the build. It's just an off-the-shelf silver thinned with window cleaner. It's easy to make as much as I need. And then I spray the hands evenly with the silver paint. It takes 3 or 4 coats for good coverage. Joe agreed to come in and use his new airbrush to darken in the shadows. Now I feel like I should point out that you can't really see this level of shadows in the movie, but I can see some airbrush shadows in pictures when the suit was first made. Chances are they all got painted over with fast repairs while they were shooting the movie. All the materials I used for this project, I actually already had in the shop. I put a part list in the description. Hey, how's it going? So I've got the upper body to a Mechagodzilla build, and I've actually got the whole thing on. This is a first. This is the absolute first time I've put this together, and this is pretty cool. This is actually fitting a little better than I expected and a little worse than I expected. I might need to make some adjustments to the armpits, and I definitely need to make some adjustments to how the pieces go together on the inside. We did some on-the-fly assembly in order to get this put together for this particular shot, and I think that needs to change before I actually wear this somewhere in the public. But for right now, hey, how's it going? I'm Mechagodzilla. Oh, it's nice. I've got really good vision. I've got decent sound. I'm actually not maxed out inside of the costume. It doesn't fit me like a rubber glove, so I've got a little bit of movement inside. And I do believe that, yeah, probably show off a wristband at a con with a little bit of help. And that was intentional, so that's good to know. That was the first test for that. So, you know, I know that there's going to be lots of different ways you could very easily, professionally, and properly make your own mech suit or giant kaiju suit. But this is how Odin makes. That's it. Max Rebo, you're fired. I'm the new keyboardist for Jabba the Hutt's Palace. Yeah, I'll learn the bleepy neck. I can do that. Sure. Who's this guy? Who let this guy into the show? Right? Yeah, okay, don't leave, please. Oh, man.
Hey, kids.
Hey, kids. I see you, you see me, we all see burning to infinity. Da, 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 da. All right, kidding. Bumble Scorpion is real. Your psychologist was wrong. I'm coming to get you. So should this be a thing? I want to thank Fred4578, Tradora, and all of my Patreon supporters. My Patreon support is the #1 thing that makes this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to make? Please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.